In this lesson, you will be practicing the different colored pencil techniques. We're going to start with different pressures. So I'm starting with a light pressure. Notice how I'm holding the colored pencil a little bit higher up on the pencil itself. And you're just doing a really light color. And notice that I've sped up the video a little bit. Obviously, you're not going to color this fast. The next one is medium, so I'm pressing a little bit harder. And the next one is going to be a lot more pressure, so you want to kind of bear down a little bit. Make that color really saturated. Apply a lot of that pigment to the paper. And our next technique is a different kind of stroke. So let's start with a straight or linear stroke. And I'm just doing or coloring in one direction, basically, filling that square. And your next one is circular, so it's kind of like doing little circles that overlap. This is really good if you don't want the overlap to show very much as it does with linear strokes. And it's good for filling in corners and things like that. And the third one you should know is cross hatching. So I'm going to start with my linear lines or strokes that go one way. And then I'm going to turn my paper and do linear strokes the other way so that they cross, hence the term cross hatching. Our next one is our value scale. So we want to go from dark or light to dark, excuse me. And I'm going to start with that really light pressure using whatever color you'd like to use. For mine I chose a light blue and I've sped it up a little bit just to save time. For my mid-tone I'm going to press a little bit harder to get that middle or that medium blue. And then for my dark I'm going to apply that heavy pressure. And a kind of in between value there. Now I'm going to blend my black colored pencil to make a darker value. Our next technique is layering, and you can choose whichever color combos that you want to, but I want you to choose at least 3 different ones. In this one I'm using yellow and blue to create green actually. So I'm going to do one layer of blue first. And a layer of yellow. I always recommend layering colored pencil because that's going to make your artwork look more complete. It's going to add more depth to it instead of just one flat color. The next one I'm doing is blue and purple. Most of the time, analogous colors look good together when you're layering, so colors that are side by side on the color wheel. And my last color combo is going to be yellow, And I'm adding a layer of orange on top to create that yellow orange. And the way I want you to practice blending is to go from one color to another. So I'm starting with yellow, and as I go on, my pressure is going to get a little bit lighter. I'm going to go a little over halfway, and then starting with orange, doing that light pressure and bearing down a little bit harder as I get to the end. So I want you to transition, create a gradation of two different colors that you like. And I'm going to fill in the box with a little bit of hatching and cross hatching. My favorite one is burnishing. I think it makes your artwork really pop. So let's start burnishing with that light colored pencil first. So I'm starting with my yellow. You can pick two colors that you think look good together. Again, analogous colors always look good together because they're side by side on the color wheel. And I'm going to blend a little bit of orange on top. So right now I'm layering it. And I'm actually adding another orange, just another layer to cover up all the paper. To burnish with your light colored pencil, you pick the color that looks the lightest and you go back over it with a little bit more pressure, and it's going to really push that pigment into the teeth of the paper, or the tooth of the paper. See the difference? This one I'm going to use a colorless blender, so I'm doing a layer of yellow first. With my orange on top. And now I'm taking that colorless blender to push those pigments together and really push them into the tooth of the paper. And you can kind of see the difference through the video here. Just makes a nice, smooth, waxy color on your paper. The last one I like to use is with a white pencil to blend with. I use this one a lot, especially if you want your subject to look maybe glassy or shiny. So again, doing that yellow layer first and doing the orange on top. And taking my white colored pencil and adding a little bit more pressure and blending those pigments together. It's a little bit harder to see, but for most colors it's going to make them look a little bit more milky or make them a little bit whiter. And there's your 3 burnishing techniques. Alright, here's the fun part. We're going to do some shading. So I want you to try to use highlights and shadows. And you're going to shade this sphere. And you can choose whatever colors you want. I'm using this seafoam green color. And I'm starting with my mid-tone or my half-tone. And I'm leaving a little bit for my highlight. And just notice where I put that little sun for the light source. And I'm using those rounded strokes because it is a sphere. Adding a little bit more pressure where there's supposed to be that core shadow. And on yours, I want you to try to include that reflected light. So I'm leaving it lighter around the bottom edge for that reflected light. Got a little bit darker pencil here. So colors that kind of look similar or from the same color family. Now I just thought I would add a little bit of blue because shadows are cool. So I thought a cool color like blue over layering would look good. So you just have to experiment and find out what works for you. A lot of times I'll experiment different color combos on a scrap sheet of paper. Now I'm adding a little bit darker blue. For that core shadow. Now I've got a little indigo here. It's a very dark blue. And I'm going to go back and burnish with that first colored pencil, the seafoam green. And I don't really like how it didn't blend as much as I want to, so I'm going to go back and try to blend that a little bit more because we want it to look like a sphere that's smooth. And now I'm going to burnish a little bit with my white colored pencil. And add a little bit of that reflected light. And just a little bit of black for the final piece of my shadow. The last thing, you want to add your cast shadow. And I'm going to use a little bit of black, a little bit of indigo, and your cast shadow should be the darkest where the object is sitting on the surface. I'm going to add a little bit of blue in there. It looks really dark on the screen, but it looks different in person. And then a little bit of white just to blend it out. And it looks a little wobbly, so I'm actually going to go back and clean it up just a little bit. Make it a little bit neater. It doesn't really look like a shadow right now. There we go, that looks a lot better. And I tend to be a perfectionist when it comes to colored pencil, so I'm using that colorless blender to burnish it just a little bit more. And that's it for your technique sheet, and we're going to glue this in our art book for future reference, so I'll let you know what page that will be on.